Unrealistic evolution path? Ryuk asked, watching as the Zephyr gave him a narrowed stare. All of a sudden, the breeze before Ryuk's face flapped, and his eyes widened a bit when he found the tip of a silver blade just a few inches away from the tip of his nose. Slowly, it recoiled back, coming to stand by a head. "This," Zephyr said as Ryuk looked at one of her tentacles. He didn't even know whether calling it a tentacle was right anymore, as half of it had been turned into the sharp tip of a sword. "Is an unrealistic evolution path. You cannot force your genes to undergo a change that leads to the construction of a non-living entity such as a blade," she explained, with the tentacle returning to normal. "So that's one of your unique attributes. What should I call it? Tentacular manipulation?" Ryuk asks, causing a glint to flash in Zephyr's eyes. "You're quite spot on when it comes to names," she seemed to praise, but it sounded more like suspicion. "I'm not trying to evolve myself or force any of this onto my gene in any way," Ryuk replied, focusing back onto his computer, as she asked. "Then, what do you plan to do with them?" "I plan to create them," Ryuk said, pausing for 3 seconds before ordering, "Awaken Nexus Legion." As soon as the words were spoken, Zephyr observed a milky white light appear beneath Ryuk's feet and begin to spread. She backed away, making sure her tentacles never touched, when in the next moment, heads began poking out from the ground. They were armored beings, blue in color, possessing various shapes. From humanoid to animals, from non-living shapes like a cubic one, to simply ridiculous shapes like a slime puddle. They all came to stand around Ryuk, filling up half the lab. "I plan to improve all of them," Ryuk called out from the front, ushering Zephyr, who wiggled forward, to stand behind him, eyeing the creatures whose eyes, though flashing with blue, also bore a deathly silence. It was clear that they were robots, but somehow they seemed to be sentient, something she couldn't exactly wrap her head around in just a couple of seconds. "As you can see," Ryuk said, turning to look at the Nexus warriors. "Their forms are pretty basic. 2 arms, 2 legs, and even the animals only have a paw and claws around them. Some of them are strong enough to use some extra power, like a weapon, and even activate an ability, but those are the best of them," Ryuk said, his eyes faintly crossing those who held grimoires. They were his ascendant generals, and Zephyr also picked up on the floating grimoires. "So you plan to give them more combative definitions?" Zephyr said, and Ryuk nodded. "Yes, but that's just for those amongst them who lean towards combat. The Warforgers. Some of them lean towards defense, the Technoguards, and I plan to design them to be heavy and may reshape their body to be something like a shield or even fort-like. And there are also spies which I plan to design to be more discreet," Ryuk explained, pointing to an image on the computer for Zephyr. She saw the image of a dove. "Exactly. If the spies are designed to resemble small birds, they will be hard to notice. Some of them might even be able to slip through tight-knit defenses by acting as cute, cuddly, and weak doves, or stand by windows as clueless little things. With that body shape, all that will need to be maintained are the eyes to record and pick up more information, and the wings in case of a needed escape. I'm planning on restructuring the entire units of the Neuroshades into this dove form," he said, as Zephyr hummed underneath her breath. But then, a glint crossed her eyes. "And why are you telling me your plans?" she asked suspiciously, and Ryuk replied, "I need a listening ear. Any plan, foolish or good, is perfect until it's said out loud to the hearing of others. So, what do you say? You think it's a good idea?" he asked Zephyr, who looked at the array of techno-constructs and at Ryuk's design on the board, before forcing a nod. "I think turning the spy ones into doves is reasonable. It's a form that can let them better gather information, like you said. But your combat drawings are not the best. If you can alter physiology with transient robots and not be limited by gene alteration and breakdown, then there are better designs," she said. "You sound pretty experienced in aspects like this." Ryuk couldn't help but notice, to which she rolled her 4 eyes. "It's literally what my anomalous nature is," she explained, and Ryuk thought about it for a while before deciding. A light flashed from the ring on his fingers, and a second chair appeared, with the computer screen lengthening up to 200 inches. "How about we both do some designing together?" he offered, but all he got in turn was a scoff. "I'm not going to be helping you," she said, watching a disappointed light faintly cross his eyes before he shrugged. "That's fine, I guess," he said, turning back to the computer and continuing his work. She expected him to try and force her, or at least plead for it, but all she got was Ryuk simply doing his thing with the same amount of focus as before. Clearly, he was unbothered by being denied. The realization gave way to a new thought in Zafer's head, and she turned to look at the army of techno warriors. "Hey!" she suddenly called out to Ryuk, who turned to her. He noted her walk up to one of the Warforgers. An eye-catching one because she was the only feminine-looking Warforger he had, and she was even an Ascendant General. Ascendant General Veltrix, to be exact. "Can you ask it not to move? I need to do something," she asked Ryuk, who urged her to go on with whatever she wanted to do. And just 30 seconds later, he was completely blown away, as he witnessed the most abnormal changes he had ever seen possible from a being. For one, he watched Zafer wrap her tentacles tightly around Veltrix's body, and then she began expanding so much so that the Ascendant General's body was completely covered and away from his sight. After she completely covered her with her tentacles, Zafer started melting. Soon enough, there was only a Veltrix herself covered in a blue-purple-colored goo, what was left of Zafer's melting. Suddenly, she moved, taking a step forward. But when she did, what stepped out was a being that looked definitely like her, with the only difference being her purple-blue skin. Once she took her second step, she was completely out, and right before Ryuk's disbelieving eyes were two people. One Ascendant General Veltrix covered in her blue techno armor, and another her, but in purple-blue skin. "You seem surprised." The words confirmed it to Ryuk. The colored Veltrix was Zafer, and she resumed stepping towards Ryuk. "What is that ability? Clone copy?" But there was no such thing amongst the potential list of ability I was given. "I can't draw well with tentacles. Hands work better," she explained, grabbing a touch pen from the side and taking the other seat. Then she sat before the monitor, and quickly she began drawing. Ryuk could only look on half-dazed, but in the end, he simply smiled, deciding not to say anything. He also focused on the keyboard, drawing out his best idea. With that, two people began working towards the development of the Technoguards, Ryuk and Zafri. Things were a bit hard trying to get along with each other's ideas, as Zafri believed she was an expert and ignored Ryuk's own ideas as too dumb, while Ryuk decided it was what he wanted to see his Nexus Legions look like. She found faults in his designs, but in the end, it was for the better. They both eventually came to a truce. Ryuk gets a base design idea, and Zafri uses her expertise to draw out a perfected version of it. This drawing and canceling once more, up until perfection, took more than 72 long hours to reach completion. An entire 3 days and nights. Ryuk's schedule during this time was simple. Design with Zafri, then take a break, playing with Iris, or take her out to eat, giving Zafri a break to swim. He had come to realize that she loved swimming very much. His taking Iris to the restaurant also gave him time to sit silently and stare out the window. It was a simple act, but it did wonders in able to make him very clear-headed. He got a few calls here and there from Mrs. Lydia, and he managed to give her some peace of mind over her worries about where he was and if he was doing okay. Although he never mentioned explicitly that he was in an underwater bunker and redesigning his Nexus Legions. He also let her know he had not forgotten the mission she had given her, adding that he was exactly preparing for that mission. And in a way, it wasn't a complete lie. "Are you done compiling it all?" Zafri asked, swerving forward on her revolving chair to sit closer to him, while her eyes gazed at the monitor. There had been more than just designs that had been achieved in the past 3 days. The Zafri Kraken's earlier annoyance of being forced to become his pet against her will had subsided, and she was now more accepting of his presence. Although she was still tight-lipped about her past life and how she had even ended up as an experiment in the Orsaken organization, he still considered her fading annoyance a major step forward. "And," he said as the interface changed to show a bar that was quickly filling up with a percentage beneath him. Soon it reached a 99%. Done, he said, his hands reaching for the side and pulling out the hard drive. She reached for it, and he passed it to her, watching her stare at it for a while before exhaling in relief. Finally, I was looking forward to completing a total of 500 of the wildest and craziest designs I had ever seen, she said, a grin forcing out from the side of her lips, before throwing the drive back to Ryuk, asking, "Now, though, I want nothing more but to see my designs standing in real life." "You mean our designs?" he said, watching as she turned to him with drooping eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you existed. 'Cause I did like 99% of the work," she said with a grin, and he responded, "That actually may be true. Sadly," he added, watching her lips curve. "But now, it's my turn to bring the designs to life, and I don't think you'll be of 99% use this time." "Oh, really?" she asked suavely. "Yes," he replied confidently. "We created 500 designs, including the new forms for those who had already been formed and the 100 to 200 or so of those who will be newly formed. How do you plan on getting them onto the design? Reforging? Welding? A built-in design module?" she asked, and Ryuk shook his head. "No, I'm not the one to do that. The Rune Forge will handle it," he said. "The Rune Forge?" she asked in return, and once more, a milky white portal appeared to the side, one she had been familiarized with now. During the design stage, she had to check things like average height and size, along with the physical profile of the already existing Nexus warriors. Also, she had to constantly reforge her own new body with the Viltrix figure, something that had made her come to like that particular tech construct, and she, of course, had partially given her one of the best, if not the best, physiques of all amongst the other constructs. "I'll have to go into the realm this time," Ryuk said, stepping forth with the hard drive held in his hands. "Well, better do that fast, or I might just chew up your cutie Iris before you arrive," she said, faking an evil smile, but Ryuk only found that even more funny. "Or you mean get chewed out by her instead? Wait, are you saying that I—" she said, but then Ryuk completely faded into the white portal, disappearing out of the lab. Her breath caught within her throat, and she turned to look at the dividing glass. There, sitting on the sofa, was a rainbow-haired girl, wearing a puffy hoodie, and in her hands were game controllers. Her eyes were locked onto the wall-sized TV that currently held the visuals of flashing swords, mountains crumbling to dust from a battle between a female warrior and a giant group of red orcs. What Zafir found even more unbearable was the chocolate bar sticking out of her mouth, which she didn't forget to mercilessly munch on, and a hill of untouched chocolate bars, just a hand's reach away from her, waiting to be stuffed down her throat. TSK. Talk of being a spoiled brat. It was a familiar space. A void of dark, littered with glittering blue techno void patterns and fragments. All around in this void were the blue armored beings, hanging motionlessly. A stifling power meandered through the area, a source of energy which Ryuk had eventually come to know as techno-energy. This was the inside of the Thnoforge ruin. With the hard drive in his hands, he didn't waste any more time, ordering Actiavet Sovereign of the Technoforge. The second the command was given, a change followed. The various void patterns in the void all came together, and soon enough, they formed an ancient-looking holographic panel. 2 runic circles floated before Ryuk, and he stretched his hands outward, with the circles came to rest beneath both palms. He turned to the large semi-transparent holographic before him and moved his hands, watching as new options began appearing. The first things to appear were a total of 400 images, accurately depicting the form of his Nexus legions. Beside them were their categories and power level. Present on the upper left side of the holograph were the advanced options: Material Synthesis, Blueprint Memory Bank Access, Artifact Evolution Engine. But one option arrests his attention: Technoforge AI Module. Moving the runic cursor up to that option with the runic circles in his palms, he tapped on it, and immediately, he watched a ball of light conformed on the screen and soon rose out of it. It was like a ball of light with glittering blue energy that flamed around it, hovering in the air above the panel. A feminine voice came out. "Greetings to the Nexus Sovereign. What is your aim today?" The words echoed out clearly, possessing the ability of reasoning, and Ryuk replied, "I have a total of 500 new designations, which I plan to model the current 400 of the Techno Warriors into. The remaining 100 will be my own personal forge creation, bringing the total of the Nexus Legion numbers to 500. He answered, watching as the ball of light illuminated brightly for a while before the voice came. "I can sense the presence of a hard drive containing all 500 designs. Please plug it in." It instructed, as the ball itself floated forward towards him. A side of it opened up to show a point which was the same opening as the hard drive in his hands. He pulled the cover on the drive and plugged it into the opening. "I'll begin scanning, identification, and legibility of design modules. Please be patient," it said, and Ryuk waited for about 5 minutes before he finally got another reply. "A total of 11 design modules have been recognized to be already tagged with an identification name? Yes, those 11 are the exact design modules made for Ascendant Marshal Obliver and the other 10 Ascendant Generals. As for the rest of the design modules, it has been classified into the 3 categories of the Nexus Legions," he explained. His 10 Ascendant Generals were the most powerful of his Nexus Legion, and Ascendant General Obliver was the strongest. For them, Ryuk had made special design and properly tagged it with their name. As for the others, he had simply chosen a uniform design for all of them. "The new 100 constructs, to what category should they belong?" it asked. 40 of them should be Warforgers, 30 of them Neuroshades, and the last 30 should be Technoguards, all to follow the same category design as the rest. He replied, "Instruction received. Module upgrade and new construction creation will now begin. Please tap on your preferred options as they appeared on the Techno Forge Ruin panel overlook." The voice instructed, and Ryuk returned to the overlook panel. It was up to 5 seconds when a line of instruction quickly began appearing, and he moved the cursor, choosing his desired options. This kept on for about 5 hours before he finally completed the last option. Turning to look up, he noticed all of the Nexus Legions were out of view. Each of them was surrounded by an egg-like cocoon of blue light that flickered in and out with various techno patterns and runes, and Ryuk could feel the surge in techno energy that radiated from each of the cocoons, most notable of which were those of the Ascendant Generals. "Your orders have been received and are being completed. Estimated time before all orders are fulfilled is exactly 168 hours. The AI voice rang out as Ryuk hummed. "That's a week. I do not need them right now, so I can wait." With everything finalized, he deactivated the skill, and the overlook panel disappeared along with the AI module manifestation. Giving one last look at the Techno Forge ruin, Ryuk turned his back and opened a portal back to the lab. He disappeared into it as the portal shut. It left the Techno Forge ruin silent, save for the hum of techno energy rising from the upgrade of the Nexus Legions. If one thing was sure, it was that they would never be the same once their upgrades were complete. Finally out? The voice resounded through the room as Ryuk stepped out of the lab to the scene of Zafir and Iris sitting on the sofa, both holding gamepad controls in their hands. The sound of frantic finger pressing could be clearly heard, coming from none other than Zafir, whose eyes remained glued to the screen. He turned to look at Iris, and she turned to him, smiling coyly, revealing chocolate bars staining her teeth in a chocolate color. "Seems like both of you are busy with business?" Ryuk said as he walked towards them both and sat on the sofa. He turned to look at the screen where a fighting game was currently being played, and then he turned to look at the score. It was quite eye-opening. 1070 points were present underneath Iris's name, and under Zafir's name was an emboldened 0 in blood red. "Wow! Someone's really getting chewed out alive," Ryuk exclaimed, watching as Zafir ground her teeth, forcing out, "Shut up." It wasn't up to a minute later, when the game over Panel appeared and Zafir angrily flung away the controller while Iris giggled loudly instead. Tisk, what's so funny? You cheating monster? Her hands turned into tentacles reaching for Iris, but she was faster, jumping forward towards Ryuk and wrapping around with a giggling scream. He slapped off the approaching tentacles, much to her irritation, turning her hateful eyes to him. At least accept your defeat with grace, you amateur, he said, mockingly as she scoffed. Tisk, I'll definitely be chewing her out next time, she muttered beneath her breath, standing to go pick up the controller and playing a solo game by herself. He turned to look at Iris, finding her yawning tiredly. It was clear she was a bit exhausted from all the gaming, and she turned her head upwards to look at him, smiling coquettishly once more. He rubbed her hair, his hands snaking to her mouth and prying her lips up. She wasn't surprised at all, and a brush-like object appeared in Ryuk's hands, sucking away the chocolate that covered her teeth with every wipe. Soon enough, Ryuk could see those white teeth, and only after did he properly lay her on the bed, tucking her in gently. He lowered the bright lights coming from the ceiling and walls, letting them release a soft, multicolored glow that he knew made Iris sleep better. He then brought out her sleeping goggles to protect her from the bright illumination from Zafir's game. She didn't refuse the goggles, but once it was won, she leaned forward, kissing Ryuk on the cheek, while telepathically sending an exhausted, "Good night. Stop sneaking in kisses, you twerp," he said, watching her smile in satisfaction, before her breaths evened out, a sign of her having fallen asleep, even though she kept her smile. "And good night," he replied, turning himself under the sheets. With one of his goals of coming to this bunker having been almost completed, he felt his body craving for a bit of genuine rest from all the computer work. He decided to oblige this time, but he had not yet closed his eyes when he noticed the light in the room suddenly dimming a lot. Turning to look forward, he witnessed Zafir switching off the TV. Once she did, she crawled over to the bed, by his side, whispering, "How was it?" "It's being worked on, but it will take about a week before it's all done," he responded, watching her brows crease from obvious impatience, but it eventually settled. "It better be worth it," she threatened before diving beneath the sheets and turning to the other side. It left Ryuk alone in the middle, and for a moment he moved up to his wrist to check the time. "It's 4:57 p.m., he whispered, feeling a head turn to him. It was Zafir who noticed Ryuk looking at the watch, a rare occurrence. These past few days he never did that except when he needed to take Iris out to eat, but Iris had already done so for today and was even currently snoring loudly. "Planning something?" she asked him, and he nodded. "Yes, I need to go see someone. I'll leave at 8 o'clock and we'll be back before sunrise," he said. Zafir paused from his words before asking, "Can I come with you?" At her request, he turned and gently said, "I'll need you to stay and watch over Iris while I'm gone. But that will be you doing me an important favor, so I'll be owing you one not too wild request of yours," he said with emphasis on the last part of his words. "Fine. Better get back before sunrise like you said, though," she said, and Ryuk didn't forget to grab a chance to tease. "On. Is someone already missing my absence?" "Scoff. You wish," she said, turning away from him and going silent. Ryuk grinned, satisfied before his gaze drifted up the ceiling of the room. The starlight danced across, and even though it wasn't the real thing, it did wonders in slowing down his heartbeat. A week from now, and all of the Nexus Legion will have been upgraded. I only have 2 things left to do: contract the other beasts and fulfill Mrs. Linea's requests. I've been trying to save away the former because I lost a lot of blood essence the last time, just trying to contract Zafir. But it's been 4 days now since then, and I'm feeling a lot better. I should be able to handle contracting one more. And then, there is Mrs. Linea's request, which I'll be fulfilling tonight, he thought silently. For a second, an image flashed in her eyes. The image of a golden-haired fallen angel, followed by a flicker which could barely be registered as Ryuk closed his eyes, both arms placed on his chest. It was quiet, and soon enough, his breathing evened out as he fell asleep. Half an hour later, Zafir stirred from her sleep, turning her sides to face him. Her eyes fluttered open to look at him, and she maintained her gaze, noticing that he didn't stir at all. It was clear he was already fast asleep. A strand of white hair had fallen over his nose, and silently, her hand reached out, taking away the strand from the tip of his nose. Turning back to look at him now, as much as she wished to deny. He is even more handsome while sleeping, she thought silently to herself. Those thoughts made her drift down memory lane to the time when he had first met him. Her immediate response had been to crush him with her soul domain. But in the end, he had won, even managing to blind all three of her soul eyes. He was stronger than her when they had first met. There was no doubt about that, and she had thought only a life of hell awaited her from being contracted to him. But for the past few days, things were much better than she had ever imagined. There was nothing that had happened at all to remind her that she was only here due to having been forcibly contracted. And even her annoyance at not having a choice in the process had faded away. If not for him, she would either be dead or in slumber anyway. And all these days they had both been onto something important, with not a single request having been forced on her. If anything, it was him being forced to react to her constant and endless headaches, with most having been done to specifically annoy the hell out of him and make him snap. However, until now, it seemed nothing she did could really push him to that level. In the end, I don't think things are that bad at all, by his side. They might even be great instead, she said with a small smile on her lips. She snuggled closer to him, feeling his warmth and scent, and it did magic in hallowing her feel safe. Soon enough, her breath also evened out and she fell asleep too. The Dominaire family grounds. A territory belonging to one of the three most powerful fallen families on Amamora. Its defense system was nothing to scoff at, with fallen guards everywhere the eyes could see. More than half of them are hidden from ordinary eyes, while technological artifacts lie hidden around corners that are almost impossible to notice for most. As such a renowned family, such a layer of defense wasn't overkill, but a must against enemies and invaders. On the highest point of a building 10 kilometers away from the Dominaire family gate stood a person. One with unrecognizable features, as they remained completely draped in shadowy cloaks that seemed to suck in all the surrounding light, allowing him to almost fade away completely into the surrounding darkness. This person was none other than Ryuk, and he stared down from the top of the building, looking directly at the Dominaire family grounds, and picking up on most initial security tests. Blinking twice, his panel appeared before him, and on it was the silhouette of the image of the Dominaire fallen ground, accessible with the satellite access. This feature is available only because he is an Archguard. It was meant to be able to better navigate missions in the fallen royal grounds, but what other thing was better enough to serve as a map for Ryuk? With its aid, he was able to locate the main building of the fallen grounds. The exact place where Mrs. Linnea had explained hid the book that revealed all there was to know about being a chosen. The Dominaire family grounds was big, city-size big, but the main family building was even all the way in, meaning he would probably encounter hundreds of defense systems before he could even reach the front gate. And even then, the buildings which were built around the library were another eye-raising and suspicious object of their own. They built the main building at the center of the clan's elders' abodes. If memory served him well, he still remembered one of the elders, Elder Nagarasuk, being at the Apocrypha stage. And he was just one of 12 elders. Some elders had already reached the Exigna stage, and the third Grand Elder Ryuk met upon his previous awakening in Kika, still had an unknown cultivation stage. For the building to be built in such a strategic place, then most likely, it hides their important ancestry secrets. It fits the description of where the chosen book could be hidden. But approaching such a place will also mean being placed on the radar of the strongest in the clan. He thought, instantly seeing through the ploy. Tapping the side of his head, the golden notification panel disappeared, and Ryuk's hands reached to the side, a mask appearing in his grasp. A dark mask, whose face rippled with nothing but shadows. He placed it on his face, and in an instant, his presence was completely erased. Unless one looked directly at him and squinted hard, they would find it impossible to see he was there. He had purchased the cloak and mask from the shop to increase his chance of success. A flicker of light appeared in his hands, and an object appeared. A tiny circular technological artifact, one that Mrs. Linnea had given to him. The mission is simple. I get access to the main building, find the chosen book, and place this tiny thing on top. Once it beeps 3 times, it means all the information has been obtained, and Mrs. Linnea gains access to it instantly on her comms. Until I do this, I can't afford to be seen or discovered. He thought to himself silently, his fist unconsciously clenching hard within his palms. Tonight, he would be pulling off the impossible, at all costs. His clenched fist relaxed, and a focused glint flashed in his eyes, though obstructed from view by the shadowy mask. Silently, a dark void vortex opened beneath his feet, and he sank into it, disappearing completely from the rooftop a moment later. Many things gave Ryuk the absolute advantage in sneaking into the Dominaire royal grounds. The first wasn't the cloaks he was wearing, but his massively increased sensory ability. He could hear the sounds of footsteps from miles away, the words being spoken by everyone in about a kilometer radius, and even the most silent whirring ripple that all the hidden technological artifacts were making. He knew exactly how long it would take for a guard to reach from one building to the fourth, while staying hidden by 7 buildings away. He didn't possess divine sense, but in this situation, that worked to his advantage. For a cultivator to achieve this level of sensory ability, they would need to extend their divine sense. Consequently, other cultivators would easily detect their divine sense. What was even better was that he could feel the areas covered by his divine sense, drawing from his experience using it. His reason for choosing the night to embark on this mission was a fickle thought, but it helped him a lot. The guards had been there all morning, remaining active and alert, but right now most of them were lax, happily discussing in 2s and 3s. Their state of alertness had lowered, and this enabled him to sneak through places where he would have normally needed to take a detour. He made sure never to take a step at all, in case there was anybody like him who could hear footsteps from miles away, too. All his movement was done by a vortex appearing beneath his feet, and he sank into it to appear in the next position. It was the first time he pushed Void Vortex to its maximum effectiveness, teleporting silently within the shadows and skipping arrays of defenses. It was an absolute tool for spy work, and it wasn't up to an hour when Ryuk appeared in a random room of one of the Elders' buildings. There was nothing in this room, and it seemed to be one of the unused rooms in the gigantic mansion of an Elder building. It was a great location because from the window where he stood, he could see the gate of the main building. He remained there within the dark room, watching every single archguard that entered, and every random fallen angel that came in and out. Soon enough, he realized a truth. Nobody random ever went into the main building. New entries appeared every 25 minutes and 45 seconds, and they exited in exactly 15 minutes and 12 seconds. This exact number was an absolute, with another group of seemingly random fallen entering and exiting only for another randoms to take their place. A smile crawled up Ryuk's lips upon realization. The randoms entering the building weren't random. They were all guards, which made things even more deceptive. Before the door stood guards who appeared to be checking identities, but in truth, they were all the same. An invader might consider impersonating one of the random individuals entering and exiting, but they would likely miss the precise moment to enter or be quickly recognized by the guards, who would know each other well, resulting in them getting busted. Talk of a sleek-ass move. Also, he thought, and in the next instant, his cloaked hand moved out and picked a tiny pebble from the window. A void vortex opened up in his palms a moment later, and he threw the pebble into it, looking at the building. Immediately after, a tiny vortex appeared right before the main building, but the second it was out, runic patterns instantly appeared in the air, all concentrating their green lights upon the open vortex. This instantly arrested the attention of the guards, who immediately surrounded the vortex, but they were lost for words when they watched a tiny pebble roll out and land unceremoniously at the side. A stray space wrap? One of the guards asked the other, who picked up the pebble, feeling it in his grasp before it turned to dust. A training or fight must be occurring somewhere close. Perhaps, the chosen one is engaging in her training once more, the other said, and they both shrugged their shoulders before resuming their position. I thought it was strange that the most protected building in the entire clan wouldn't have a void block around it. But it seemed like they already put in place void detection formations. The second anyone tries to teleport into the building, they'll be instantly discovered. With those green lights following them around, it's only a matter of time before they have a swarm of guards around them. Going in through teleportation wouldn't work. Impersonating a random person wouldn't work. Perhaps the only true way to get in is to get a permission card from an elder or something. But I don't have the time for that. All I can do is... In that moment, Ryuk watched a group of randoms exit the building. Exactly 25 minutes and 45 seconds. Another group will be on their way in. I'll have to enter exactly with them, without revealing myself. He thought and silently waited until 23 minutes later, when he heard the footsteps and small talk from an entire kilometer away. With such timing, it could only be the randoms. Instantly, a dark vortex appeared, and he sank into it, appearing a moment later behind the two fallen, who continued walking forward, not even noticing his presence. Ryuk looked at the shoulders of both of them, and in the end, he chose the shadows that belonged to the one with more size. Like a shadow, his cloak suddenly began to melt and soon fell to the ground, merging with one of their shadows. Main skill, Shadow Walk of the Emery's cloak has been activated. Estimated time before cooldown, 3 minutes. Despite all the action, none of the guards noticed, and they remained unaware until they reached the gate of the main buildings. Exchanging clear nods with the guards who looked them in their face, recognizing them, and immediately the gate was opened, allowing them in only to be shut closed a moment later. 15 seconds more before skill is deactivated. As soon as he entered, Ryuk noticed that even inside, there were guards stationed throughout the hall, but as expected, they were more relaxed than ever. Once they sighted the two people who entered and exchanged nods of recognition, they returned to discussing with each other, and Ryuk silently peeled away from the shadows, disappearing down a half-opened random door down the hall corner. Skill will now be deactivated. Time before reuse, 2 hours 50 minutes. The system panel flashed as Ryuk remained in the tiny dark room. I'm finally in, he planned in his head. Silently, he remained standing, but his ears beneath the cloak were twitching repeatedly, and a slight inhale occasionally entered his nostrils. His hearing and smell were pushed to the max, and with the aid of them, he was able to mark down the exact location of the guards who wouldn't stop talking. As for those who remained silent, he picked up on their smell. Using smell and sound, he mapped the entire building area, yet he still couldn't determine the exact location of the book. He had expected that if many guards concentrated around a place, it must mean they were guarding the book. However, the guards were spread out in no specific manner, constantly moving about, making it harder to track. Ultimately, he would need to locate it manually. I can only go out by the same way I came in, and the skill will be active in exactly 2 hours and 50 minutes. This means within that time frame I need to find the book and be done with it. The longer I'm here, the more I risk getting discovered. Also, opening a vortex around, even within her, could still mean getting noticed. I'll have to walk all the way through. Hopefully the book isn't hidden behind some security door, or that will be really troublesome. He thought, and a moment later, he stepped out of the room, mixing in with the dark and discreetly scouring around. He was in undiscovered. All he now needed to do was to find the book and finish his mission. Undiscovered. The main building was filled with halls. Halls after halls after halls. Every single door he entered led to a different world of its own, and the majority of these worlds were covered in golden light, something that almost made him as clear as day, but he was still able to avoid being seen by confirming no one was in the hall with his ability to hear, and also making sure no one was close enough. There was no avoiding one hall due to fear of being seen, or he risked missing the location of the chosen book. This went on for about 2 hours before, finally, he found a door to a hall that arrested his attention. The door itself had a drawing of an open book, with runic symbols sketched in the book illustration. This has to be it, he silently prayed in his heart, standing in a corner for some time to make sure the guards were still far away, and no unexpected passing happened in the corridor. He moved closer and gently pushed the door open. Fortunately, it did not squeak like one of those idiotic gates that almost revealed his location, allowing him to access it and gently shut it closed. He didn't even need to look around at all. In the center of the room stood an altar, 3 meters tall, etched with golden runes that glimmered with a celestial white light. Ryuk stepped closer to the pillar, and he found what he was looking for. A book that seemed no different from a grimoire, except that it was currently on fire. Yes, burning with the same celestial white flames that coated the altar. The mere sight of the book made his heart jump up by a few beats, the first time he ever got such a reaction from simply looking at a book, but there was no time to dally. As much as he felt curious to open up the book and gaze upon a page, he forced that feeling down. As he summoned the object given to him by Mrs. Linnea, he held the circular button in his hands and reached towards the book. When it reached halfway towards touching it, Ryuk watched with creased eyebrows as the cloak gloves on his hands started to burn away, turning into ashes. What was worse was that even though his hands got redder, he felt no pain at all. If I place the object on it, it will get burned off, he thought, and that was when it occurred to him. Folding the button in his palm, he rested the back of his hand on it. The white flames kept running away at his flesh, turning them searing red, but without pain, he didn't care much for it. He waited, and soon enough one of the lights on the button shone. Just 2 more. All of a sudden, he heard the sound of a step, his heart pounding fast, as he heard the words, "Hey, can you smell that burning?" It seems to be coming from the Celestial Domina Hall. The words could be heard from the guards, and the sound of steps quickened further. Another flicker of light appeared as the second blue light on the button shone up. Just 1 more. The sound of heavy slamming came from the door, as Ryuk's other hand stretched towards the gate to the room. What's happening? Why is the door so stiff? This doesn't happen normally. Knock it down. Knock it down now. Come on. Come on. Faster. Ryuk ushered on, looking at the third empty hole, which took even longer to shine. Almost there, he thought, watching a tiny flicker of blue light appear, but it wasn't enough. Turning his head back to the door, he saw that the sound of banging had stopped, but he also heard the sound of steps falling back. They'll enter in 3 seconds. A powerful reverberation echoed through the walls as the entire wall was blasted forward. Immediately after, 3 Fallens stormed in, eyes looking around the room, but they found nothing. See, there's smoke coming out from the book. One of the guards noticed as the 2 others came forward to check on the book. Unknown to them, hanging on the ceiling entrance was a figure in dark. His hands gripped the wall like a spider. The second their backs were turned, and the book took their attention, Ryuk immediately crawled out of the place and quickly merged with a shadow in a corner, a couple of doors away. He didn't speed out immediately, instead listening in on the conversation of the 3 guards. He watched them display some interest and talk of reporting to an elder, but one of them waved it off. Perhaps it's just the altar struggling to bear the book's power. I heard it has been changed a couple of times in the last 3 centuries. This might just be a sign that it's due for a new change soon. The doors will need a new fixing. Ryuk exhaled in relief, and he turned to the button in his hands. Right now, all 3 of the lights were flickering, a sign that they had copied the book's content. He didn't waste any more time and scurried out of the corridor. He waited in a silent corner for a group of new random guards to enter, and after 15 minutes had passed, he tagged along with the shadow of one of them, and they exited the main building. Once they were far enough away, Ryuk activated Void Vortex, sinking into the shadow and disappearing like a phantom. Finally out. The relieved words echoed in a garden, with the only sound to be heard being the gentle breeze and the babbling of brooks from a stream at the far side of the garden. This was a place he had found, far away from the main building and in a different place. He had, of course, taken off his cloaks and gloves. Even if he was seen now, He would only be arrested for not having permission to be here, and he could come up with some random excuse. Besides, there was no one around. He switched on his comms and found a message waiting for him. Hey, Mrs. Linnea, I have the book content with me. Great job. Hope you're safe. Yes, I'm okay. We'll be coming back home soon, he sent back, before switching off the interface, his eyes focusing. Now that he had finished Mrs. Linnea's request, it was time for his own, to find Morgaine. For one who was the chosen of the family, Ryuk didn't find it too hard to locate the area where Morgaine lived, for her name was on every guard's lips. With the tiny bits he got from about 100 or so guards, he found the place. A building just as big as the Elder's Palace but far away from their location. It was built on the edge of a cliff, its shape different from the normal buildings in the Dominaire ground. It looked more like a high-rise castle, the kind that reminded him of the Half-Fallen One's castle back on Endearth. It was clear that whoever built this must have copied a thing or two from that design, and that could only mean Morgaine probably ordered it to be built specially for her, or she built it herself. 2 guards stood in front of the castle's gate. Both were female, armed with long golden spears in their hands. He opened up a void vortex and threw a random pebble in, but the pebble was thrown back out. Void block, huh? He thought silently to himself, and just a moment later, the air flapped wildly all of a sudden, arresting the attention of the 2 female guards who turned their heads to the left. Yet, in the next instant, one of the guards snapped her head behind her, feeling a presence. But when she did, all she barely saw was the door to the castle behind her vibrating oddly. "Huh," she said, her hands pushing open the door to look at the narrow corridor. But the sight was the same and familiar. "Why did I feel like someone just entered?" she muttered to herself, then shrugged it off. Both guards ignored the heavy breeze that had caught their attention and returned to guarding the gate once more. The 2 guards standing at the front of the door were Eternity Stage, so Ryuk didn't think he needed to sneak in specially. His speed should be blinding enough for them not even to see him, and he was right. Now he was in the castle, walking down its barren length. As he continued climbing up the stairs and rising deeper, he was eventually proven right. The rooms in the castle, the position of the stairs, all of it was just like he remembered from the Half-Fallen One's castle. He opened a few random doors and found that they were already well designed, even though there didn't seem to be any lingering smell of a person living in them. It reeked of new. He continued up, and naturally, he already knew where Morgaine's room was when it came to the total arrangement. Soon enough, he was standing before it. His ears twitched, trying to pick up a sound, but they failed. Yet he could feel it as clear as day. The feeling of knowing someone was before him, obstructed by the door. He raised his hands and, knock. The sound of 3 knocks echoed on it. Waiting for 5 seconds, he got no answer, and that was when both of his hands reached out and forcefully pushed the door in. The sound that filled his ear was similar to the noise made when black holes spiral out from a completely crumbled space, and when he looked forward, he was proven right and also shocked speechless at the same time. Half the room was covered in thick golden-colored apex energy, its density greater than any concentration Ryuk had ever seen in a place. It was so potent that it had condensed into a vast sea of bountiful essence. But hanging just around this condensed essence were black holes, warping in and out of the space. What was mind-numbing was the fact that he knew black holes couldn't really be controlled, yet all the black holes around this place were appearing and disappearing without exerting any dragging force, almost as if they were a manifestation. He looked forward and found someone sitting cross-legged in the center of the pool. Her golden hair flared all around, while all the black holes spiraling forth around her made her look like the center of the solar system, her mere aura being the one to create and stabilize them. Suddenly, the sound of a katana being pulled out of its sheath awoke Ryuk as the edge of a blade flashed through the space behind his neck, cleaving towards him to decapitate him in one swift stroke. But just an inch from Ryuk's neck, the sound of metal clashing against metal resounded as Ryuk's 2 fingers gripped the edge of the blade. Only inches away, veins bulged all over his arms, the katana quivering as it tried to push forward, and Ryuk turned his head to look at the one who had attacked him. A woman, whose eyes he could only see, the rest of her face hidden by a piece of dark clothing. She exerted strength through the blade, managing to drive it forward. But then, Ryuk twisted his fingers, and immediately cracks spread along the edge of the blade, before shattering into metallic fragments that flew around the room, embedding themselves into the walls. The woman stepped back from her weapon being destroyed, and the moment she did, a spatial hole swirled forth from behind her, instantly swallowing her up. Ryuk remained standing in the same position, and less than a second later, his ears twitched and the air flapped in a revolution as Ryuk did a full 180-degree turn, both palms clamping against the edge of a blade that pierced towards his heart. The instant he grabbed the blade, like a snake, he took a step to the side and let it go. The edge tore through his heart, but it was only an afterimage. His hands lunged toward the black hole as the woman stepped back and disappeared. She seemed to succeed, fading back into the black hole until Ryuk's hand grabbed firmly onto her head. Immediately, she was dragged back out of the black hole by Ryuk, but then she suddenly felt his hold on her head release. The second she did, it occurred to her to conjure another black hole and escape, but right then, the world fell silent. Time seemed to fall into an absolute crawl, with her heart beating as loudly as a gong being the only sound. The realization to run faded away, and for a moment, she forgot how to even do so. All of this anomaly came from something, and unconsciously, she raised her gaze, and there it was, a colossal fist blazing in purple smashing forward with a power that could blow an entire star to dust. It was like the sun itself, coming down with a fury that could never be stopped or resisted. So much power. The thought occurred to her, as the fist came closer and closer, her heartbeat ringing so loud they were all she could hear, until a voice cut through it all. Stop! It was like a divine decree as the colossal fist in the air instantly paused in its track, before its colossal form faded. She blinked once, and she found herself back in the room, a purple-colored fist hanging just a centimeter away from her face. Unconsciously, she looked behind the fist, to find the shimmering purple eyes that held nothing at all in them. But she knew the horror she had seen, and it made her step back away from him. Ryuk slowly took his fist back, rising upright and looking forward to the place where the familiar words came. He found her now standing on her feet, her white gown sticking tight to her body, wet from the apex essence, with golden eyes staring at him from just 5 meters away. Stay back, Morgaine. He's very dangerous. The cloaked woman called out, another black hole spiraling forth from beneath her palms, and soon enough, a sheathed katana once more found its way to her hands. But just then, the sound of footsteps echoed out from the side as she watched Morgaine step out. More! She called. But just a moment later, she was already before Ryuk. Her hands reached for his cheeks, and her lips moved closer to his. But just before they met, he swerved his out of the way. The reaction surprised her, her eyes flashing with shock as she took a step back from him. You refused my kiss? She asked Ryuk, who looked into those golden eyes, and he spoke a word that shook her to the soul. Do you really think I'm too blind to recognize what is mine and what isn't? He asked, watching her grin fade, and she asked, What do you, Maya? Her words were forcefully stopped dead in their tracks when Ryuk's hands reached out with the speed of lightning, latching onto her throat, and in half a second, she was in the air, dangling from his hands. TCH, you bastard. Let her go! The cloaked lady roared in anger. But then, once again, her body suddenly froze, paused in the stance of unsheathing her katana. She turned forward to find 2 shimmering purple eyes looking in directly with hers. Do you feel every inch of your cell, telling you that if you moved any of your muscles, just 1 more inch, you'll die? He asked, hearing the sound of teeth grinding tighter from beneath the cloak. He turned away from her to look at Morgaine dangling in his hands, and he asked, Where's Morgaine? It was a question that didn't seem to make any sense to everyone in the room, but by the sound of the question, it was like a heavenly decree that could not but be answered. How did you know? You're not looking at her? Anomalous entity possession recognized. Warning. There's a high chance a familiar soul to Host has been possessed. Host must exercise caution. The system panel notification blinked before Ryuk's eyes. But even then, he could see it as clear as day. The eyes that look at me are not the ones I know. Yours have already lost their innocence, he replied, watching her brows crease. Ryuk had seen many killers in his life, and he had a susceptibility to being able to tell what type of person one was simply from looking into their eyes. He knew Morgaine, and he doubted she had ever killed at all, as looking into her eyes gave him this feeling of lightness and freedom. It wasn't heavy. It looked almost unnatural, and every time, those innocent eyes captivated him. But he also knew the other eyes, the eyes that have taken a life. No matter how many colors his own eyes take, Ryuk can see the deathly silence in them. He had recognized it from Zarkul's green hollow eyes, and the same was true for Odette's purple eyes, that shifts into a darker color of death anytime she draws her weapon. There was nothing but death in those people's eyes, which added even more to their deadly aura. Morgaine's eyes right now weren't the innocent thing he knew. Even if she had killed someone during this time frame, her eyes shouldn't have turned this deathly. The eyes before her looked almost like those of Odette, eyes belonging to one who must have taken a mind-numbing amount of life. So, I'll ask once more, where's Morgaine? He said, watching as she looked at him quietly for a long while, trying to find a flicker of doubt from his eyes. But then, the sound of something like an electric shock entering a body echoed in the room, and Ryuk's hand suddenly shot away from her neck, his fingers twitching wildly. She landed onto her legs, but didn't wobble at all, her hands reaching for her neck and scrubbing away the slight sting she felt. "You know," she said, as she stopped rubbing her neck, turning to look at him, "the little girl did mention having a man, and the mere thought of that made me sick for an entire week. If her virginity had been taken, I would have killed her off immediately," she said so mercilessly that the cloaked lady unconsciously took a step back. "But, I have to say, for one who is reported to be 3 or so years younger, you seem quite capable for your age. I'll ask you for the last time," Ryuk said, and she paused, looking at the ground beneath his feet. All of a sudden, it began to shudder and then crack into nothing, though there was no aura release of any kind from him. "Where is Morgaine?" Each one of the words rang out clearly through the room, the sound of further cracking resonating through. Her grin widened at the sight of this. It was clear that he was just one more irk from exploding, and such a view she found pleasure in. "Oh please, lover boy, you seem like you." Her words weren't completed before they were replaced by a groan. Golden blood splattered out of her lips, irises widening to the max as a fist smashed straight into her stomach. Her body curved like a bow compressed, flaming white and purple energy bursting chaotically through the atmosphere before. Kaboom! An explosion so powerful that the entire building collapsed into dust erupted as a figure pierced backwards with terrifying speed, blasting open repeated circles of shockwaves. Her body crashed through 3 entire buildings, the unstoppable momentum by which she was being pushed back great enough to reduce all of them into debris before she finally smashed through a mountain range, rending the entire thing to dust. From the dust, Ryuk stepped out, white hair billowing intensely as a tornado of intense hurricane energy burst through the entire sky, changing the golden color of Amamoran's sky into a glittering purple. His left eye was furiously burning with purple as he took forth steps in the air, entire abysses carving open from each step, even though he remained so high in the sky. The sound of something moving quickly through the air echoed across the Dominaire grounds, followed by powerful auras blossoming all around. In less than 5 seconds, the entire upper space around the Dominaire ground had been shut down by the incredulous aura arising from the new entrances hanging in the air. They were the various elders of the Dominaire family, some of whom were able to observe the collapsed mountain, all of a sudden turning into dust, by a sudden flare of golden aura. Followed immediately, a being stepped out from the collapsed debris. The chosen one? The one who came out was none other than Morgaine, but now, she had undergone massive changes. For one, her mere height was titanic, a proportion of 5 full meters, clothed in a divine armor that radiated a light as bright as the sun. For golden rings pierced out from her back, burning with heavenly white flames, and in her hands was a spear, 15 meters in pure length, surrounded by black holes that spiraled in and out from their slightest swings. With each step forward, the entire space shook as she advanced, her teeth clenched in fiery anger. Her gaze locked directly onto Ryuk, a roar slamming forth with unbridled fiery rage. "You will pay for your insolence. Elders, get rid of him." Her orders resonated clearly, and instantly, all the elders turned to Ryuk, who continued moving forward amidst a spatial disruption that worsened with each step. Still, the order was divine. Immediately, they summoned forth their weapons, auras fully unleashed as they rushed towards him. Warning! Warning! Host Emotional is experiencing an extreme level of emotional dissonance. Emotional dissonance scanned to be anger. Host is advised to please calm down, or intelligence stats risk being ineffective. The space around Ryuk quivered once, and a white flame pillar erupted through the skies, the power of it enough to send the approaching elders halting in their flights from the incredulous heat. Divine white scales shifted out from his skin, layering all over, until they formed a tight-knit pack of draconic scales all around him. His hands shifted into slender claws, his height growing up to 3 meters. 6 frost shards slipped out from the void, rotating around his head with one of them shining with a white flame that raged all over his divine scales. What's with this aura? The elders all roared in shock as they felt themselves being pushed back by Ma-Air aura. They tried to resist, but the pain of trying to break through his mere aura was like an ordinary mortal with no clothes on, trying to enter a house completely lit in flames. Furthermore, it felt like an earthquake unfolding in their chests, pressing down so hard on their hearts that some found breathing to be an incredibly difficult task. This level of aura. Only the Grand Elders can invoke such an aura? The realization hit them as they watched the young man step forward, both hands clenched into fists, with his teeth pressed tightly against one another. Purple veins covered his skin, bulging massively, making him resemble a monster from hell. Yet the aura he oozed out was divine. Who is he? Summon the Grand Elders. Undersir. How sickening it is. All of your prides. The words echoed out from him as they all remained rooted in place by a sudden aura. How sickening it is. How much I have to put off. I can't move? I hold enough power to rid you all of your lives, and yet you all act like only the opposite is true. Ryuk forced out, teeth grinding harder from uncontrollable anger. Why do I always have to keep up with so much of your nonsense? At this point, he raised his head, his gaze colliding straight with Morgaine's. Tell me, on what reason do you all base your pride? Power? What do you all know of power? Ryuk roared out insanely, and in the next moment, his anger fully gained control of him, drowning out all reason. He took a single step forward, body crouching to the ground, and then, kaboom! The entire land beneath his feet jolted backwards as he rushed forward with blinding speed. An abominable scene occurred when Ryuk rushed past the elders on his path. One by one, kaboom! They all exploded into blood showers, their entire body collapsing from a divine pressure that was enough to fold them completely and then burst them into nothing. Ha! A sea of blood splashed into the sky, and all she could do was stare in disbelief. But even that seemed denied to her when she saw him ripped through the scene of blood, formed from her clan elder's explosion, and then, boom! A shockwave erupted as space itself collapsed. A fist covered in squirming white and purple veins slammed forward with heaven-shaking might toward her face. Reflexively, she reacted, her 4 wings instantly winding around her figure. It was like iron clashing against iron, and Ryuk felt a terrifying rebounding force knock into him. The recoil forced him 3 steps backward, but on the 4th step, kaboom! The sound of space being ripped apart was drowned out by another explosion as Ryuk pierced forward and smashed out with his other fist. It landed squarely in the center of the golden wings, causing them to give way instantly as Morgaine was blown backwards, her wings forcefully spreading open. A roar blasted out as golden veins popped out from beneath her skin. Her hands gripped tight against the spear, and she forcefully took a step forward, the world sinking from her step, and then, the edge of the spear pierced forth in unruly might, bringing with it the power of successive overlapping black holes. It appeared in an instant before Ryuk, immediately drowning the entire space around him in their power. Morgaine barely reacted to the sudden attack, placing her spear to the side of her ribs, just as a scaled slammed into her from the side, forcefully blowing her away from where she stood. TCH. A groan left her lips from the force of the attack, and her eyes widened when she turned her head to the other side. He was already there, spinning in the air with blinding speed before his legs lashed out once more with terrifying precision. She blocked with her spear, but the sound of cracks spreading through her hands' bones reached her ears in disbelief. So much power, she thought, blown back towards where she was coming from. His image flickered once, and she raised her head, sighting a purple phantom pillar of a leg slamming toward her from above. Dominaire War God Art. Radiant Warden. Immediately, time slowed down to a screeching stop, the phantom leg halting in place. Morgaine swerved her spear behind her, as the collapsing black holes converged over her weapon, completely enveloping it. She slashed out 3 successive times toward the phantom legs. The first strike hit the phantom but was immediately obliterated. The second followed and managed to create crack marks all over the leg phantom, with the third finally blowing it apart, sending a mushroom of energy into the sky. It cleared up a moment later, but her eyes widened in shock as she looked into the sky and found him nowhere to be seen. Immediately, she tried to recoil her spear to her side in a guard, but was shocked speechless when she felt a tight hold, and her spear refused to budge. Turning to its tip, there he was, his hands holding onto the end of her spear. The black holes raging on the spear were snuffed out by the divine white flames that covered his hands. "Let go," she said, but all of a sudden, she was forcefully jerked forward with power, and she flew uncontrollably toward him. Clenching his fist, the space around Ryuk's arm exploded into nothing, his fist clenched tightly. Hurricane and white flames danced, a furious might that collapsed the space into a gaping black hole, and when she arrived before him, the deep, droning sound of space being forcefully compressed echoed as his fist smashed forward with incredible power. Morgaine's eyes bulged when the fist slammed precisely into her stomach. "Again?" she cursed under bulging veins, as her blood flew out from both nose and mouth. A second later, and she was blasted backward, tearing open a massive black hole, which she disappeared into. In Ryuk's hands rested the 15-meter-long divine spear, and a rift of dark suddenly appeared, to which he tossed the spear before resuming his steps forward. A moment later, Morgaine was thrown out of the black hole, slamming into the ground and carving open an abyss. She rose to her feet, but then, one of her knees dropped as she remained crouched to the ground. Golden blood gushed out from her lips, her eyes thickened with golden veins all over. So heavy. Ack. She remained there hacking up blood, with her body convulsed, muscles locking and trembling as her stomach twisted inward, crushing her breath into a strangled wheeze. Her vision turned blurry, but she barely felt the slight rustle before he grabbed at her neck, wrapping tightly. She gripped his arm, her fingernails digging into his skin, but they were for naught. She only left white harmless marks on his draconis scales. She was raised high into the air by him, his burning purple eyes staring so intensely they seemed to look straight into her soul. "What happened to that confident grin of yours?" he asked, as her teeth ground together in fiery hate. "Why not call upon your pride to save you from me?" The sound of a katana being unsheathed suddenly rang out, and an arc of light flashed with devastating speed. Blood splattered into the air, a severed hand suddenly flying skyward. Morgaine felt the hold on her neck release, and instantly she backed off, flying into the sky, but she had not flown far away, when she felt her back colliding against something, and she turned her neck to find an unbelievable scene. Just behind her, both legs resting on her shoulders and stopping her in her tracks, was none other than the grinning demon, whose eyes burned with a sickening madness. His right hand reached forward and grabbed the two left wings of hers. The other hand, which she remembered having been severed earlier, instantly regenerated, grabbed onto the other two right wings. "You're nothing." The words were like an unending echo that resonated through the deepest part of her soul. But a second later, a more visceral pain settled in. The sound of something being torn out rang out as Ryuk pulled on all four wings with all of his power. A terrifying, blood-curdling scream of pure pain left her lips as golden blood sprayed into the air. Ryuk's hands pulled back, holding four large, severed golden wings, with blood splattered all over his face. He watched her fall erratically from the sky, like a fallen angel, slamming into the ground and carving a crater. This time, she didn't get back up. But then, Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed, and he stared at space before him, which was suddenly sliced open. From the depth of the slice, the familiar edge of a blade appeared once more, cleaving toward his face, as if to sever his head into two clean halves. His neck jerked down to his shoulders, the blade flashing toward his mouth instead. The next second, Ryuk's cheek parted up until his ear, a draconic maw shifting out and clamping hard against the katana edge. Cracks immediately spread through the entire katana surface, and then it shattered into nothing. Right after, Ryuk slammed the wings in his hands against the space where the blade had come from. Space shattered into fragments, revealing a figure that plummeted downward like a shooting star, crashing into the ground and skidding back several meters before coming to a halt. A dark rift opened, and Ryuk threw the wings into it before they closed. He then turned to face the new attacker. "We meet again, old man," he said, floating down from the sky and landing onto its cracked surface as he watched the old man rise from his skidding position, standing upright to face him. Ryuk could still recognize the old man. He was the one whom he had found in the Koenka, one of the three grand elders of the Dominaire family, who had shown the family's decision to punish Elder Nogara and had led him to that underground area where the elders were being punished for plotting against him. His face was at first devoid of emotion, looking at the side where Morgaine's battered body rested. But he wasn't much ruffled, knowing well she was still breathing. But then he turned to look around, and Ryuk watched as his face went through a 180-degree change, from calm to horror, when he saw the sprayed blood all over, mixed in with splatters of remnant organs and blood. Even if it was nothing but blood and tissue, he knew it well, and his aura billowed out uncontrollably, unable to be restrained. He turned to Ryuk with eyes burning golden before saying, in a rather calm voice, "You massacred all of the clan elders," he said, and all of a sudden his hands raised to the sky. The sound of golden lightning crackling from the sky rang out, and then a pillar of golden lightning blasted downwards towards his raised arm. Ryuk watched all of this without a single change in his expression, and soon enough, the lightning dispersed. In the old man's palm rested a 1-meter-long golden sword, completely covered in celestial white runes, with golden lightning dancing across its surface. "Do you feel any remorse?" he asked, turning to look at Ryuk, who had a glint flash in his eyes. "I'll reply with two questions. Firstly, when a lion and tiger fight, and an ant is asked to move out of the way, but doesn't for whatever personal reason it may have, does the lion or the tiger ever feel any remorse if it gets crushed under their paws amidst the battle?" he asked, his voice though low ringing clearly. "Secondly, when you took the only daughter of a family who all want nothing more but to start a fresh new life in a new world, and replaced her consciousness with an old ancient monster of your family, did you feel any remorse?" He spoke, and in the next instant, his right fist clenched tightly, powerful blue and purple light gleaming all around. Even more shocking was when the purple runes on him began shifting to a golden hue. "He can use fallen energy? How?" It surprised him, but even more, he listened to Ryuk's question and answered, "Morgaine's consciousness was never replaced, only switched. To realize the full potential of her bloodline, We had the consciousness of one of our greatest geniuses implanted into her with an ancient fallen soul technique. This consciousness only shows up when she is cultivating to enhance her cultivation veins and increase her cultivation speed. Morgaine is the one who owns the body if she's not cultivating. Moreover, the consciousness was implanted because she consented, noting that she vowed to bring peace to the world by becoming the strongest. The elder answered, leaving Ryuk in stunned silence. He could remember that she was truly cultivating when he had entered her abode. If the word of the Gand elder could be believed, then the new consciousness was only there because she was cultivating. Moreover, the reason Morgaine had consented could not be overlooked, as their last conversation involved her speaking of peace. The mention of her wanting to be the strongest to achieve her goal, and going through a risk as getting a new consciousness, wasn't something that was beyond Morgaine. You thought Morgaine had been killed, and your anger is not without reason. But killing all 10 of the clan elders, you went too far, he said, and Grand Elder Shota swerved to the side behind him as he got into a striking position. As you understand that my anger is not without reason, and may be due to a misunderstanding, I also understand that as the Grand Elder of the family, it's only right for you to seek revenge against one who had killed your elders. Ryuk agreed. But my truth never changes, he said, just as his right leg moved and he slammed it before him, both hands folding into fists. Fallen apex energy danced around his fist, the 6 shards around his head starting to spin faster. Calm yet callous, he spoke. Anyone who wields killing intent towards me, right or wrong, will die by my hands, he uttered like a divine decree. Let me warn you, old man. If you wish for revenge, then only one of us will walk out alive. After that, the void around him quivered as 2 grimoires appeared, hovering by his shoulders, with one surrounded by frost energy and the other by void energy. But that wasn't all. Tiny motes of golden lights suddenly shifted out of the void, coming to surround Ryuk, and when all of this was completed, his already insane aura burst through its previous hold, rippling so madly that the world around him lost all of its color, with Ryuk possessing only the color of white. Time around him seemed to come to a halt, with everything paused in place, but the Grand Elder knew well. This was an illusion that occurs when a being's power wave is so powerful that even time itself struggles to hold its primordial restraint upon them. A power level that was coming to touch upon the boundaries of the heavenly. But it did not deter him. His grip on the sword tightened as he prepared to strike, but suddenly his hand began to shake uncontrollably. His eyes widened to their max a moment later as he sighted something. Behind Ryuk there was an entity of dark, who hid behind Ryuk's figure, holding a curved scythe to the side. Grand Elder Shota had sweat unconsciously dripped down his temples, his eyes remaining locked onto that phantom hiding behind Ryuk. All of a sudden, the phantom moved its cloaked face, and all Elder Shota saw was a grin that revealed a crimson maw, where he could almost hear the various painful cries of souls. A single word rang in his mind. Death. Just after it occurred to him, the dark phantom faded away as if it never existed, leaving only Ryuk, who remained where he was, obviously waiting for him to make the first move that would start the death battle. He is my death. The vision that was just revealed to him was a unique art of his that activates before any battle. It has a single purpose, to reveal whether he would live or die in a fight. If he did not see the death entity, then no matter what, he would not die in that battle. And in all of his life battles, only twice had he seen the death entity, both opponents of which, even without seeing the death entity, he already knew he had 0 chance of surviving deep in his soul. But Ryuk would make the third. How could he possibly just retreat? The young man had eliminated all clan elders except those being punished or on a mission. 4 Apocrypha stage beings and 6 Exignis stage beings. A power level that solidified their clan as one of the 3 most powerful fallen families in Amamura. And now, their remains lay just a couple of eaters away, and he was supposed to back off and let that slide as the clan's Grand Elder? His hand gripping his sword handle tightened, but all of a sudden, Ryuk watched as the old man rose upright from his slashing position. He raised his sword into the air, and golden lightning crackled once more before it came down and swallowed the sword in Grand Elder Shota's hands. The clan elders who are already dead are already dead. Fighting with him will only cement my death too. Even if I succeed in killing him in retaliation, the power of the clan will diminish significantly if I die. The hundreds of thousands of clan members, and all the resources, will be quickly absorbed by the other families, with many of the clan members killed to ensure loyalty. If I fight him and die, which I will, the clan loses not just the elders but everything. It occurred to him, and he exhaled deeply. Quelling the burning rage of revenge, he felt flaming in his heart before saying, "You win." Without saying any more words, he turned his back and walked towards the place where the remains of the elders were. Raising his palm, a draining force appeared. A total of 10 orbs appeared in his hands, each of them sucking at a remnant of the blood, until all the blood was completely sucked into each of the balls. Then, he gave one last look at Morgaine before he turned his back and walked off. If we never tried to even that girl in, perhaps such a calamity would have never fallen on us. Or perhaps it is simply the fate of the Dominaire family to really fall out of its hierarchy, and in trying to avoid this absolute fate, we got ourselves even closer to it faster. As his back completely disappeared, Grand Elder Shota's final words reached him. "Take care of your beloved Morgaine, for the sake of all of those that have been sacrificed due to her existence," he said, continuing, "Take good care of her, and maybe the karma of that will reduce the harsh punishment that has now been ordained for you." When he completely disappeared from view, Ryuk deactivated all of his activated techniques while returning his grimoires to his library. The time naturally resumed after, and color returned to him once more. "I thought he would have fought. Who would have thought he would have chosen to retreat?" Ryuk mused silently to himself, but then shrugged it off, turning to look at the unconscious Morgaine. He stepped closer to her, crouching when he reached her side. At this point, the notification panel flashed. "You dealt great pain, not just physical but also mental, to the consciousness that was possessing her. This will no doubt greatly lessen the power which she had over Morgaine's own consciousness. I'm sure, once her eyes open up, it will be the real Morgaine that will appear in the consciousness seat." Ryuk hummed under his breath before he picked up Morgaine's body and flew into the distance. In the end, he had completed his true mission. Congratulations on completing the quest. Bring an end to all of Chosen facades surrounding Morgaine. Once and for all. She'll be okay, won't she? Mrs. Linea's words echoed in the silence of Morgaine's bedroom, where she lay unconscious on her bed, with Mrs. Linea sitting beside her. And by the side, on a chair, sat Ryuk, silently tapping his fingers against the armrest. "Yes, she would," he answered with a reassuring smile. After he had left the family grounds, he had bought her a high-ranked healing serum from the system's shop and fed it to her before deciding to bring her back home. All her injuries had healed, and her body had stabilized before he showed up. They only needed to wait, and hopefully her consciousness would be strong enough to take control of her body. Mrs. Linea rubbed her daughter's forehead. Truly, she didn't seem to be either hot nor cold. Her temperature was okay for a fallen, and her breath was even. With her worries calmed, her calms appeared before her, and she browsed through them before Ryuk felt a ring in his head. "There is a lot of top-secret information in the book," Mrs. Linea continued. "Most I haven't gone through, but I've gotten some findings from the book related to one being a Chusen. I've sent you the important notes." Ryuk opened up his comms and browsed through the notes he had been sent. All of it correlated to what he had already learned. The Chosen One having to be replaced by a new consciousness and being bred for power to become an ultimate powerhouse for the sake of advancing the family up the hierarchical ladder of status. It was something that was obviously only advantageous to the Dominaire family. It appeared beneficial for the Chosen One, as she was nurtured with the family's full resources. However, that was merely a facade. In the end, she is only grown in power so as to be a slave to the whims of the family, and there was absolutely zero consideration towards the Chosen One's families. It wasn't even mentioned at all. Have they really fused a new consciousness in her? Mrs. Linnea asked, and Ryuk remained for 3 seconds before he ultimately answered. Yes, but that consciousness should be weaker now. He answered when all of a sudden, the light in the room came on brightly. Morgaine's room had its light previously disconnected by Mrs. Linnea due to her absence. However, after her return, she naturally switched it back on, although it required some time to fully activate. As soon as the TV turned on in the room, Mrs. Linnea instinctively reached for the remote on a nearby desk to turn it off. However, she paused when she noticed the news currently being shown. Ryuk noticed it and turned back, and he saw a satellite image of what had gone down just a couple of hours ago. It revealed a truly heinous-looking purple devil, who was turning the clan elders into a spray of blood while exchanging blows with Morgaine. She was identified as the chosen one of the Dominaire family who bravely defended her family against the monstrous entity's attack. The news attempted to comfort the Dominaire family after the loss of their clan elders and announced a bounty of 500,000 Amma coins for anyone who could bring the invading monster to justice, and warned other families to be on alert. Those purple tattoos, Mrs. Linnea noted, and she turned to look at Ryuk, especially at his tattoos. Her spine chilled at the realization. Was that really you? She asked, surprised as the footage of absolute destruction and unmatched domination by the purple devil played again at the end of the news. Yes, that was me, but that wasn't Morgaine. It was the other consciousness of hers, and it had to be weakened if Morgaine was to wake up. He explained, and she exhaled. I'm not mad you defeated one who possessed my daughter. I'm thankful, if anything. But killing all of the Dominaire clan elders. Do you think they'll let this go? She asked, and silence reigned in the room for a while before he replied. They won't. The Grand Elder had tried to seek revenge, but in the end, he had retreated. But he was just one of the 3 Grand Elders of the Dominaire family, and according to hierarchy, there was usually one Supreme Elder in these families, one whom Ryuk had not even seen, nor was aware of his cultivation stage. One of them might retreat, but would the Dominaire family really allow their clan elders to be killed without retaliation, and their chosen one, whom they had spent so much time and resources on, to be taken away from under their noses without trying to get her back? He wasn't stupid enough to think they wouldn't come back for revenge. It might not be now, since their enemies now have news of their weakness and would soon be sieging them from all sides. But once that was done, all the hate would be directed back to Ryuk, and obviously, Mrs. Linnea and old Jack would be taking part in the damage. We have to move out, Mrs. Linnea said quietly. I'm sorry for the trouble, he said to her. If he had not lost himself to anger back then, perhaps, he wouldn't have killed all of the clan elders from his unregulated aura. Perhaps, he should have just returned home after doing what she had asked him to do instead of going in search of Morgaine. Perhaps, No, Mrs. Linnea said, cutting off his thoughts as he turned to her. If you had returned after sending me the book and I learned my daughter's consciousness is being replaced, I would have still asked you to bring her back home. Mrs. Linnea said, not the slightest of doubts in her words. The Dominaire family would not have agreed to that, and we would have no choice but to move away from their radar. The result is the same as now. We would be at odds with the Dominaire family. Your actions only made what would eventually happen come quicker. And that, at least, saved me from the heartache of spending days knowing that Morgaine isn't truly Morgaine, and feeling the pain of her absence while debating whether it would be worth the risk to try to bring her back, all the while trying not to get you into trouble. Decisions made under such a pressure-filled emotional state would only end in a mistake in the end, and who knows what extra damage it will cause. Your actions cut away all that, and now we have Morgaine and a clear next motive, which is to move out. So, don't guilt-trip yourself. You did what was best for us, she said, and Ryuk found it hard to really refute her points. She stood up and left the room, her fingers rapidly tapping on her Amma comms panel. I'll call up Jack. The sooner we're out of here, the better. That night, at 12 o'clock, Mrs. Linnea insisted they move out. Even though Ryuk reassured her that he would remain with them for the night, and she knew full well his strength, having seen his terrifying form on TV, she still insisted on leaving. The house they were currently in was given to them by the Dominaire family as a gesture of goodwill, but it was under their jurisdiction. There were legal actions the Dominaire family could take on that property that might land them in jail, and Mrs. Linnea was wary of that. If they were imprisoned under Amamoran law, Ryuk wouldn't just be fighting the Dominaire family to free them. He would be fighting the entire planet. The thought of that, she couldn't bear, and that night they packed away. The luggage wasn't a problem thanks to their storage rings, and soon enough they were on an Ammonius, moving to a new location. As for that location, Mrs. Linnea had already found one. Old Jack had long suggested she move to the place where he worked, since his post as a minor butler earned him family living quarters. But she had refused because the royal family he worked for was going through muddy waters, which she didn't want any of them to get in. Now, however, it was an advantage as she came to learn. The royal family old Jack worked for was one of the 5 most powerful angelic houses on Amamora, the Nobita Angelic House. It wasn't just a powerful angelic house. It was also one of the houses that the top 3 fallen families, including the Dominaire, viewed as their greatest nemesis, and the vice versa was true. It wasn't that angels hated fallens. It was that the royalty amongst angels and the powerful families amongst the fallens had a deep hate with each other. That right now, to their family, was an advantage. The Nobita Angelic House was far from Dominaire territory, like comparing Grade A to Grade D on Endearth. Entire continents apart, where the Domaire family held no power or influence at all. Even if the Dominaire family discovered their location, taking action would be difficult. By aligning with the Nobita family, she knew the angels would never allow a fallen clan to walk into their territory and snatch someone connected to them. They'd be more willing to fight due to the ancient hatred that ran through their bloodlines. Whatever went down, it was the safest place they could be, and besides, old Jack, too, would finally get his wish to have his family live closer to him. It was a win-win all around. Even though her fear of them getting into the muddy waters of the Nobita family was also a worry, it was less than getting into a confrontation with the Domaire family, who were now obviously itching for one. The entire journey only took about 3 hours. It should have been longer, but Ryuk secretly activated King's aura, bolstering the capability of the Ammonius they were on and allowing them to fly faster to the Nobita family grounds safely. At the front gate was already old Jack, who seemed to have gotten in good relationships with the archguards that protected the house entrance. Because of that, they were able to skip the basic ID checks and were instantly welcomed in, with instructions to finalize the formalities later. Once inside, they arrived at the residence old Jack had been given for his position. And only now did Ryuk understand the ache old Jack felt. The houses they were living in before, compared to what was before them, were like comparing buildings from Grade E to buildings in Grade B. What was a simple story building back in the Dominaire territory was a full mansion in the Nobita Angelic family. They settled in quickly, with the overenthusiastic and happy Jack helping them out, and Ryuk also stayed for the night to assist. When the first light of dawn came, they had already settled in properly, and Mrs. Linnea was able to heave a sigh of relief, finally joining her daughter in sleep. The shock of learning the truth about her daughter being chosen truly meant, along with the need to evacuate their house, was overwhelming. Even more so for one who usually had everything planned out and under her control. Once things slowed down, she gave in to her exhaustion. Old Jack checked on his wife and daughter, covering them up before he moved upstairs to the open roof. There, he found Ryuk sitting and watching the slowly rising sun. I don't know if Mrs. Linnea has said it already, but sorry for our impromptu arrival. Must have been quite annoying to rush something like that, he said to old Jack, who stepped forward towards the railing. When old Jack received the call from Mrs. Linnea, it was evident that he had been enjoying a nice sleep. The sudden news that they had to move to his place, especially in the middle of the night, must have startled him quite a bit. It was remarkable how quickly he managed to settle them all in the span of a few hours, and it was sure he must have pulled some strings for that to happen, something that must have been even more stressful. It might have been an impromptu arrival, but, he said, his hand reaching to his coat and bringing out a cigarette box. He took one and passed Ryuk one, but he turned it down, resulting in a grin from old Jack. He knew Ryuk hated the smoke with passion, from back in Grade E, so he wasn't surprised he turned it down. If anything, it was a sign that the young man was still the boy he knew. Having you all finally moved here is kind of a dream come true? Old Jack smiled, lighting up his smoke and taking a long puff, before exhaling in deep relief. Really? Ryuk asked, and the man nodded. Of course, things that are obtained from well wishes cannot be confided in, you know. Huh. Yes. You know, our home back there wasn't really owned by us, but given to us by the Dominaire family. Kinda have to do with Morgaine being the Chusen and all that. But, Ryuk, do not allow anything given to you as a boon give you absolute peace of mind, nor have you placing all your hopes on it any time, Old Jack said as he looked at him square in the eyes. Because the reality of boons is oftentimes they can always be taken back. If you attach your sense of self or peace to it, then once it is taken back, you don't just lose the boon, you know what else you lose? He asked, and Ryuk hummed under his breath. Whatever it is you attach to it. Exactly. In a way, that house, which seemed like a well-wish, could have been the Domini family's way of secretly having some control over us. A way to keep us docile, 'cause without them we may lose our house. That was why I tried to get somewhere else. And this place, I'm quite confident in. It wasn't a well-wish, but given because of the effort I put into the Nobita family. If I falter at my duty, then naturally it will be taken away. It gives more peace of mind knowing it is earned from my own efforts than simply given as mercy or pity. So, that's why all of you being here is a dream coming true. You understand my deeper meaning, no? He asked, Ryuk, who raised his head, looking at the half-peeking sun through the golden clouds. I understand, he said, and Old Jack exhaled a puff of smoke, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Silently, they remained sitting, before Ryuk rose, when the sun completely exited the clouds. I need to be somewhere, he said, turning to Old Jack, who waved off. Go ahead. Morgaine is still asleep now, Ryuk said, turning to look at Old Jack. I'm sure Mrs. Linnea told you about the replaced consciousness, he said, watching him nod. According to my calculations, then the one who should wake up should be the real Morgaine. But, hey, Old Jack, nothing is absolute, he said, watching as the man's eyebrows creased. What are you trying to say? If Morgaine wakes up, and you feel even a little bit that the one you're talking to is not your daughter, exit the house and call security, he said, watching as a glint flashed in his eyes. The one who is sharing her consciousness is an ancient monster. But don't worry, even if she wakes up, she should be very weak. She has lost her wings and lost her weapon. Without them, you should be able to escape, and anyone at the Apocrypha stage should be able to restrain her easily. Of course, this is just in case. I'm sure Morgaine will gain back her control. She's your daughter after all, he added, levitating off the building and rising higher into the air. Old Jack also finished his cigarette. The end of it turned to ashes as he turned back and waved to Ryuk. I'll send you a text when she wakes up, he said, moving back inside, and Ryuk became a glitch that faded into the space, disappearing completely. You're finally here. The words echoed the moment the elevator opened, and Ryuk stepped in. He had promised Safri that he would be back by morning the other night. Irisai jumped into his arms when he got into the room, as he spun her around before settling her on his neck. Anyone need a little early morning sun bath? He asked, watching Zafri immediately jump from the bed, tiptoeing to the elevator. A few seconds later, they arrived before the sea once more. This time, Ryuk allowed Iris to swim with Zafri, and her gleeful scream as she raced out was ear-deafening. His frost grimoire appeared, and he conjured a chair of ice on the water before taking his seat, exhaling in relief as he fell onto its cold embrace, which managed to numb his thoughts for a while. He spent an entire hour doing nothing but taking deep breaths in and out, and only opened his eyes when the notification flashed. Host's emotional dissonance has been quelled. Intelligence has now gained its max effects. The truth was, even after Ryuk left the Dominaire grounds, his anger never quelled. Anytime he thought back to the fight, He felt his anger brew once more, and the sight of Morgaine seemed to worsen that anger in him. Especially when he heard the Grand Elder's reason why Morgaine had allowed herself to be fused with such a consciousness. He had done all he could to rein it down, but he knew he just needed to leave that place. Only here could he let it all out without bringing destruction, the tingling laughter in the background only aiding him. Host has completed the mission. Bring an end to Morgaine being chosen. Rewards. 1. Final level up card. 2. Plus 700,000 purchase points. 3. Plus 30 ability upgrade cards. Final level up card? Ryuk asked with a raised eyebrow, looking at the bizarre reward. Final level up card? What's that supposed to mean? But before he could question, the notification flashed. Does host wish to use level up card? Yes, he agreed reflexively, and the notification blinked. Congratulations. Host has reached level 200. Important note. Level 200 is the maximum level of the Draconic Pets evolution system. Huh. The system blinked, and Ryuk sat silently, unable to believe his eyes. I have. Yes, Ryuk. You have reached the maximum level possible. Ultimate quest completed. Reach the maximum level possible for the Draconic Pets evolution system. Rewards. 1. Plus 1 absolute evolution card. This card evolves all of host's physical existence, down to the most minute cell. 2. Plus 1 all skill evolution card. Evolves all hosts' accumulated skills. 3. Plus 10 pet evolutionary cards. Evolves one of the host's contracted pets to its next phase of evolution. 4. A recorded ancient holograph that informs all about the system's existence and creation. 5. All the system stored primordial energy passed on to the host, but only after the host's absolute evolution, as the current host's vessel cannot fully take in the power. 6. A primordial title. Would host like to use rewards? No. No. Ryuk called out, jumping to his feet. His sudden outburst caused 2 heads to bubble out of the sea, both staring at him suspiciously. I just want to change clothes. So, I need a private place, Ryuk said, hovering into the air before rushing toward the distant island. What is he hiding? Iris muttered, and Zafri replied with an uncaring shrug. His dick. An eelfish was slammed onto her head, sending her plunging deeper into the sea. Her hands shot up to cover her head from the sharp sting of pain. Giggles burst from Iris' lips as she quickly swam away. Tsh, come back here. Zafir roared in pain, and soon enough, it turned into a full-blown chase. Ryuk appeared above the island, slowly descending onto a humongous tree branch before taking a seat. Hey, system. Yes. What do you mean by maximum level? Maximum level is the level that the host reaches, which cannot be surpassed. It is the absolute limit within the system's creation. Host started from level 1, the beginning level. He surpassed level 100, which was the mid-level, and hence obtained the runes of strength. And now, host has reached level 200, which is the absolute maximum possible. Does host understand now? What happens to you now? He asked, his voice calm but cracking despite his effort to suppress it. Nothing. Huh. What? The system panel flashed as Ryuk's lips opened and closed before he finally forced out. I thought you would be gone. Host might have reached the maximum level achievable, but the system's main goal is to ensure host achieves the peak of his potential. This means the system will remain, recording host's additional stats, pet's attributes, and even his personal attributes, including those of all his skills, while still running the shop tab. What about quests? And obtaining EXPs? That is no longer possible. Host has reached maximum level, so EXPs are useless now, and level-up cards serve no purpose either. Quests may still be issued, but when completed, the rewards will no longer include level-up cards or experience points. Instead, host will receive more ability upgrade cards, skill fusion cards, or evolution cards. Without level-ups, I can't get attribute points to grow my stats. Yes, you can no longer grow your physical stats directly through the system anymore. However, if you encounter a fortuitous opportunity, your stats will grow and will be recorded by the system. The only difference is that the system can no longer influence them directly. But I believe you already sensed this, Ryuk. The system panel flashed as he paused. You are starting to outgrow the system. The 100 or 200 attribute points you were receiving from level-ups were no longer effective against the massive number of stat points you already have. You have come a long way, perhaps too long a way. The system panel blinked, and there was nothing he could say to refute it. Truly, towards the end, the attribute points he had been receiving no longer made any noticeable difference. Even if he amassed 1,000 attribute points, which would require hundreds of level-ups, it still wouldn't significantly change any of his stats that had already surpassed 10,000. But I don't feel like I've grown that strong at all, he muttered, clenching and unclenching his fist. He could feel the power within him, but it doesn't feel enough, does it? The system panel flashed, and he remained silent. How you feel, Ryuk, is the same thing that happens to everyone climbing the ladder of growth. The system panel's glow flickered, drawing him back in. One who starts on the path of wealth from nothing may once feel satisfied with just 100 AMA coins and a simple tent to sleep in instead of the streets he normally sleeps on. But as they gain more, they move to a new house, then buy a car. The sense of achievement lingers for a while, but soon enough, feeling comes, it's not enough. New needs arise, ones they never even imagined before, but which are not in any way less necessary than their previous, and soon they require 2 cars and 3 houses. But that too fails to fulfill them. So they set their sights on an estate, then a collection of cars, and eventually even planes and boats. Through all this, they know they're rich, but it's just not enough. Yes, that's what it feels like to keep climbing the ladder. That ultimate sense of achievement always seems to elude them. It lingers close, but fades the moment they think they've caught it. The same is true for you, Ryuk. It is. At first, all you wanted was revenge for your uncle. Then, the nightmares caused by Zarkul forced you onward. You killed Morn and got revenge. You killed Zarkul and stopped the nightmares. But in doing so, you birthed a new goal. To reclaim your missing body parts. You were strong when you defeated Zarkul, but it isn't enough to defeat the other 6 calamities. If you had stopped at Zarkul, then reaching level 200 of the system would have given you a great sense of accomplishment. But now, all you feel is that it isn't enough. You don't know whether to be happy or sad, or if you should feel accomplished after coming this far, because it just isn't enough. To you, the journey only feels like it has just begun. Is it wrong to feel this way? He asked. No. That is simply how it feels when one continues to walk the path. The system's maximum level was set from the very beginning, and now you have reached the peak of it. But it seems you have not yet reached the peak of your potential. It is only natural to keep going. So, this empty feeling I have is natural. It is. The system blinked, and he remained silent for a long time. Empty. That was how he felt now. Empty. But it did not last long. One day I will grow strong enough. I will reclaim my body parts from the calamities and become whole. I will uncover the full truth, avenge myself, and ensure that all those who died so I could continue to breathe find their justice. And when I finally do everything I have dreamed of, I know I will feel fulfilled. I will find my peace then. I will. Will he? Now that Ryuk knew reaching the maximum level of the system didn't mean losing it or having it fade away from him, he felt much more relaxed. Even if I don't gain EXPs and level up cards anymore, there are still many ways to increase my strength, like studying arts and techniques, or fusing with new beasts and gaining new elements. It's far from a hopeless situation. With that understood, he could finally go through the quest and look at the rewards carefully, and he was impressed. This was by far the craziest list he had ever seen. Truly fitting of that final level boss reward from Iris game. Of the entire list, the one that drew his attention the most was the holograph that was said to explain to him the system's origin. Uncle Bob had mentioned he had found it in some ruins, broken, and had repaired it. But obviously, before it could have been broken, it must have been whole once. Perhaps the vision would show him that. And the evolution cards, it was no-brainer that if he evolved right now, it would obviously take time, leaving him in slumber. He couldn't just do that on top of a tree, and as much as he was trying to take things slower, now didn't seem like the best time to remain completely inactive. Right now, he needed Morgane awake and Iris reunited with her parents before he could afford to vanish into slumber. Even though I don't feel that happy moving from level 1 to 200, I guess that's statistical proof of my clear growth. It's nice, he thought, a small smile tugging at his lips as he rose from the tree and moved back to the sea. The tumbling sea waves were all he needed to confirm the girls were still in the water, and he clapped twice. Okay, sunbath's done. Time to dry up. A tentacle rose, dangling none other than Iris at the end of it. Rainbow tears dripping off her face. "Ryuk," she cried, yelping in shock as the tentacle flung her forward, but he caught her safely. "Zafir beat me up, wuh," she whimpered, and Ryuk looked at her hands, noticing how she was gripping her ruby-red buttocks, which had a couple of lash marks, albeit already fading. "Zafri!" Ryuk roared, glaring at the octopus as her tentacles rotated and shifted, and she transformed back to General Viltrix. "What? She started it first?" Zafir protested, tapping her feet on the water and opening up the glass barrier before quickly disappearing down. Ryuk rolled his eyes at the sight, consoling Iris. "Don't worry, I'll get back at her later." With that, he stepped into the glass-like barrier, Iris in her arms, and disappeared from view. In the bunker, Zafir and Iris sat on the floor, gamepads in hand, their fingers rapidly flicking through the buttons. Sweat poured down Zafir's temples, while Iris, for once, wore a serious expression. She had never really taken Zafir seriously when it came to gaming, since she usually sucked at it, yet right now, for some reason, she found it harder and harder to defeat the usually dumb octopus. While they were embroiled in their battle, Ryuk sat far behind them on the sofa, in his hands a grimoire glowing with iridescent milky white light, and on the cover were the words, "Introductory Manual of the Lantern Mythic Elements." Old Jack had given him these manuals, but he'd never had the time to read them until now. While Ryuk had started out reading the book simply because he wanted to keep himself occupied, it hadn't been a few minutes before he became fully absorbed in it. The lantern element, one he had never seen or heard of before, was introduced, and he was quick to learn it was one of the most mysterious and different elements he could ever imagine. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes into hours. After exactly 5 hours, Ryuk flicked the last page closed and exhaled deeply. He slumped back onto the sofa, the book dropping by the side of his head. His eyes shut closed as every word replayed in his mind at incredible speed, until he could remember it word for word. It's truly a mythic element. According to the manual, the lantern element was unique. Unlike fire, frost, or void, rooted in natural forces, the lantern was tied to light itself, but also touched on the unreal, guidance and memory. It was an element that teetered on the edge of light, soul, and fire, often manifesting as glowing light in the shape of a spectral lantern. Hence the name lantern. But it wasn't just for seeing in the dark like he had thought previously. It could reveal truths from illusion, bind spirits, and guide the lost, repelling their darkness. There were many real-world applicable skills which were defined as its core properties. A total of 3 were given in the grimoire. The first skill was called Lightblade, which could be formed by condensing lantern flames into a solid beam of truth light that could cut through illusions and soul barriers. The second was Guiding Beacon, which summoned a floating lantern that marked out safe routes through corrupted realms. And the last was Lantern Wall, a barrier of lantern flames that repelled spectrals and even shadow-based attacks. The majority of the uses of the lantern touched upon the dark astral elements, which Ryuk wasn't very knowledgeable about. Lost souls, spectrals, those weren't things he had seen, but he had heard of them, though he didn't know how true that was. Still, it didn't prevent him from touching the small core implanted on the grimoire. his runic marks changing their color to an iridescent silvery white. Since he had already read the manual, he might as well quickly familiarize himself with the skills. Who knew if he might just have a use for them later in the future? With his runic tattoos changed to the lantern element's energy, it only took Ryuk a little less than an hour to be able to use all of the elements in the book, something that alarmed him quite a bit. Sitting with his back against the sofa, a spectral lantern could be seen in his hands. His left gripped it by the handle, and where the candle ought to be burned, a blazing white light. Reaching his right hand out to the candle's side, he watched as motes of white light shifted out of the lantern's chimney. The second they were out, they first conjured into a round ball before quickly changing, soon forming a massive 1-meter-tall sword of pure white flames within Ryuk's grasp. The light blade, he muttered beneath his breath, swinging the sword around him a couple of times. Flames trailed through the air, a truly beautiful sight, but the space around him didn't cut like a sharp blade would have. In fact, it didn't even seem like the blade was passing through the air at all, like it was unreal? Weird, he muttered to himself, then switched to the next technique. The blade converged once more, returning into a ball, and then the ball reshaped, spreading out all over. Quickly, it formed a dome that covered Ryuk completely, keeping him housed inside. The lantern wall, huh? I thought it should be like a straight wall and not a dome. Yes. Finally! The loud, excited shouts made him turn away from the dome to look at the front. Right now, Zafir could be seen jumping around excitedly, a wide grin plastered across her face. Ryuk turned to look at the TV, and the score surprised him a bit. It was 50 points under Iris' name and 1 point under Zafir's name. It seemed low, but compared to the last time when the score was 1070-0, it was clearly a massive growth. Iris didn't seem that sad. She dropped the gamepad, picked up a chocolate bar, and crawled over to Ryuk. When she reached the dome, she paused, her hand reaching out cautiously. But when it touched, Ryuk watched her fingers simply phase through like it wasn't there at all. The little girl didn't think too much of it and quickly crawled inside, jumping onto his chest. 50-1, huh? Seems like someone's a fast learner, Ryuk voiced out, watching with an eye roll as Zafir pumped up her chest. Of course, fast learning is only the base expectation of a mighty Zafir Kraken, she boasted, trying to act nonchalant, though her words were practically dripping with pride. She noticed the barrier surrounding Ryuk's figure and walked forward toward it, curiosity in her eyes. "Oh, what's this?" she asked, reaching her hands forward under Ryuk's silent stare. The second she touched it, she yelped, jerking her arms away from the barrier like one electrocuted. Zafir looked down at her arms and noticed motes of white flame quickly burning along them. She managed to blow them off once at the shoulder. But then her hands weren't the same anymore. In the place where her arms ought to be were 2 dangling tentacles. The flames had burned away her transformation, revealing her true state. "Oh, so that's what it does, huh?" Ryuk thought, an almost evil smirk of realization forming on his face. Zafir noticed the evil smirk and flung the game controller toward his head. "You evil thing!" she shrieked. Ryuk caught the gamepad before it could slam into his face. "Sorry, I was just testing it out," he replied, which only earned a scoff from Zafir, who ignored him and tried to change her tentacles back into normal human arms. But a frown quickly settled on her face. "Why is it so slow?" she muttered under her breath. Even though Zafir's form really isn't an illusion but a copy, the lantern flame still burned away and revealed the true state of her arms, which were the tentacles. But not only that, it makes it harder for her to get back into that form after being burned by it. That should be quite helpful in a fight against annoying transformations, he thought to himself. After exactly 10 minutes, Zafir was finally able to regain her arms, and naturally, Ryuk stopped using the lantern element. A problem occurred after, though, as he noticed the lantern flame core on the grimoire's front cover had visibly reduced to just a tiny lump, showing its deterioration in essence. So, touching an energy core to copy it also drains away the essence, Ryuk realized, returning the grimoire back to his shop space. I guess I'll just have to find a much bigger lantern essence core if I plan on using the elements. But then, out of the corner of his eyes, a sudden surge of rainbow light caught his attention. He turned and found himself to be the source. All of his tattoos were rippling with rainbow light, only to dim a moment later, then switch back in the next moment. He looked at Iris in his arms and watched her poking him again and again, seemingly taking joy in watching his tattoo colors shift from rainbow to purple. "Stop that, rabbit head," he said, ruffling her hair as she pouted coquettishly. "How did you even do that anyway?" Zafir called from behind the glass. She was in the opposite lab working on the computer, but right now she was staring at him, confused and curious. "Do what?" Ryuk asked. "Your tattoos. Like, Iris touches you, and you turn into that rainbow energy around her hair. Are your tattoos capable of copying essence energy? Or do they steal a little bit of it? How does it even work? What energy is your main one?" She fired off a flurry of questions, revealing to Ryuk that she had probably been holding them back for a while. He opened his lips to give some explanation, but paused at the last second, an idea entering his mind. How about a deal, Zafir?" "A deal? What deal?" she asked, and Ryuk replied, "I tell you how my tattoo works, and trust me, it's more mind-blowing than you think. And in return, you show me what makes a Zafir Kraken different from other Krakens." "Deal?" he asked, watching the Kraken furrow her brows in thought. She tried to think of any loophole in his words that could place her on the lesser receiving end, but in the end, there was nothing much except one. "What do you mean by what makes me different from other Krakens?" she asked, and he replied, "I mean, Zafir Krakens are not ordinary Krakens, right?" She nodded. "Then what makes you unique? Your skills? Your abilities? Your form? I want to know what's special about Zafir Krakens." "That's all," he said, and she shrugged it off. "Deal, but you start first," she said, walking out of the lab to sit closer on the sofa, her eyes locked on his tattoos. "Firstly, these tattoos," Ryuk said, sliding his hands over his runic marks, "are a manifestation of an energy called hurricane. And no, it's not some energy like flames or water, which fall under apex energy. Neither is it a type of abyssal energy or etheric energy. It is a fourth energy of its own," he explained, watching her mutter. "Hurricane? I've never heard of that before. That's possible. After all, even I myself only know there's one other person like me in this entire universe who possibly controls hurricane." "Two in a universe?" she said in disbelief. "Yes, it's just that rare." "What does it do? What makes it different from abyss, apex, or etheric?" she asked. "Abyssal energy is dark, belonging to most evil races. Apex is elemental attributes or an amalgamation of them, and etheric deals with mind and soul. But hurricane has just one attribute. Its ability is to copy all other energies and replicate them for its holder," he said. "A copy energy?" In reply, Ryuk reached out and grabbed her hand. She flinched at his touch, the first time he had ever touched her. But then something began to happen that took her attention away from the contact. Ryuk's tattoos began changing from their shimmering purple into a dazzling new energy, an energy of purple-blue color that gleamed in her eyes. Soon enough, his entire body glittered with that mix of blue and purple, an energy she immediately recognized. "Oregon energy. That's my energy," she thought, and Ryuk let go of her hand. "You see how my tattoos copy your energy? I don't know if it's apex or etheric, but it copied yours. You see?" he asked, and Zafir hummed. She already had an idea forming and said, "Try doing something with it," only to watch Ryuk stare blankly at her. I can't." "Huh? So you just copy but can't use it? What's the point then?" she asked, perplexed. "It's not that I can't use it. I just don't know what the energy I copied is, and I haven't seen it used before. If I copied a flame, I could form a fireball since I've seen that before. If I got frost energy, I could create a frost sword. But if I haven't seen what your energy can do, I can't really use it. You get it?" he explained, and she scoffed. And I thought it was cool. Huh. So if you fight me now and copy my energy, it'll still be useless, and you'll have no power to use? She asked. Ryuk shrugged. Not really. I can save energy, although that's extremely difficult, and up until now, I have only saved 2 energies, he said. Zafir watched as 2 grimoires appeared around him. She watched him reach out and grab one, the white-paged one. Just a second later, his tattoo color changed to a frosty white. When it did, the temperature dropped by hundreds of degrees, and a sword of frost quickly formed in his grasp. He slashed it to the side, and frost washed across space, freezing everything into nothingness. It's quite powerful, it occurred to Zafir. He grabbed the second grimoire, the darker one, and a dark vortex began conjuring all around. He formed a ball of frost and threw it inside one vortex, only for it to exit another, again and again, before Ryuk eventually caught it back in his palm. So you have frost and void energy saved? She asked, and Ryuk nodded, saying, So, if I face you in a fight, I won't really be powerless since I can always just grab my frost or void energy. It's quite the unique energy, isn't it? He asked, and she hummed. As much as she wanted to deny it, she couldn't. Not all cultivators could control multiple attributes. The most she had ever seen a cultivator control was 3. But with Ryuk, he could instantly copy any energy, and if he knew well of it beforehand, then he could use it to attack. Besides, he could also save energy, and right now he had 2 elements stored that he could use at the same time. In a battle of energies, he would be very difficult to beat, but that makes him far from invincible. Even if he copied energy mid-battle, he would still be limited in knowledge to the knowledge and efficiency of the original wielder who had wielded the energy all his or her life. That, in the end, restricted him to just the saved energies he had, and what's more, energy skills weren't something easy to master. It takes years for elemental laws and attributes to be comprehended, and the more attributes one has, the less attention one can devote to studying each. It has potential but is still far from truly being absolutely invincible. I guess it's a bit unique, she admitted, and Ryuk returned the grimoires to the Echo Library before returning his stare to her. Now it's your turn, he said, but then watched her humph instead. You just told me you can't use my energy unless you know how it works. And now, you want me to show you how it works? What? You really think I'm that dumb? She said, snickering in mockery at him. What the? Hey, we had a deal, remember?